Welcome back to Medrash Umaisa, sharing a story for this week's Parshas Tazria, Parshas HaChodesh. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach would share a story about what gave him the strength throughout his lifetime to avoid machlokes. He said that when he was young in the neighborhood of Shari Chesed in Yerushalayim, there was great excitement because they heard that the son-in-law of the Chofetz Chaim, Rabbi Aaron Cohen, had decided to move to Eretz Yisrael, and he had decided to come to Shari Chesed and settle there. The community helped prepare an apartment for him, and he came and was received with great fanfare. It was a community that had great kavod HaTorah, kavod of Talmidei Chachamim. After a few months, people noticed that they hadn't seen Rabbi Aaron for a while, for days. Not in shul, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, not in the street, not in stores. They started to ask around, and they got very worried. A few of them gathered and went to his apartment. They knocked on the door, there was no answer, and they got someone to open the door, expecting the worst. When they walked in, what they found was not Rabbi Aaron, but nothing. The apartment was empty. He was gone, and all of his belongings were gone. They started to ask around to see if anybody knew what happened. There was one old gentleman who remembered seeing Rabbi Aaron getting on a wagon with a lot of things in there, and that was a wagon that was going to be heading to Yaffo. So they sent a delegation, a mishlachat of people to Yaffo to find Rabbi Aaron and to hear what happened. They came to him and he said, I know that you would like to know why I left and why I left in the way that I left, so suddenly without telling anyone. He said, I'll tell you, before I left Europe, I went to my father-in-law, the Chofetz Chaim, to get eitzah, to get advice. I asked him where I should settle, perhaps in Yerushalayim, perhaps in Tzfas, perhaps in Yaffo, perhaps in Hebron. He told me that any of those places could be good, but the most important thing was that I should not be in a place where there's any machlokas. And he asked me to give him my hand. And he asked me to promise him with tkiyas kaf, with a handshake, which is a very powerful commitment to make, that if in the place where I would settle, I would see that there's machlokas, that I would immediately leave. He says, after living in this neighborhood in Shari Chesed for a while, I discovered that a machlokus was brewing, something about who would be the gabbai in the shul, the powers of the gabbai. I took my commitment to my father-in-law very seriously, and I left immediately. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman said that seeing that incident got into his bones how negative machlokus is and how important it is to run from machlokus at all costs. He used to guide people in life, telling them, lifetimes are made up of decisions which pathway to proceed on. Oftentimes a person wants to know, is the pathway I'm on the right pathway or the wrong pathway? He says, this much I can tell you. If the pathway you are on leads to machlokes, lashon hara, it's clearly the wrong path. Because we know that the Torah is drachei darchenom b'chol nesivoseh shalom. All of the pathways that are legitimate Torah pathways lead to shalom, not to machlokes. This ties into our parsha. The Kli Yakar says that the reason the Mitzorah, who received tzaras for speaking lashon hara, for dividing up people, for creating machlokes, has to go to the Kohen in his process of tahara, is because the Kohen is supposed to inherit from Aaron HaKohen the midos of oyev shalom, rodef shalom, of being able to draw people together, the opposite of machlokes. This was the midah of Aaron HaKohen, and this was the midah of his descendant, Rabbi Yisrael Me'er HaKohen of Radin, the Chofetz Chaim. Wishing everyone a wonderful Shabbos and a good Chodesh. Kol Tuv.